Sly handled being outed for HGH better than anybody's handled a scandal ever. It was about the most baller way to handle something. They hit him with that very typical Good Morning America. Now, Sly, you were outed for HGH.
The cynics are going to say you had those things because you're off going to shoot Rambo, and you wanted to be pumped for the role.
And instead of him coming out with this, I want to apologize to my family, or lying and saying it wasn't the case, Sly says, yeah, I think a lot of people ought to know about the benefits of testosterone and human growth hormone.
Hey guys, in today's video, Sabo and I talk about Stallone's physique and his known GH use during the 2000s. So this is part 3 of a series I'm doing with him. Check out his channel, by the way. I'll link it in the description below. It's called Sabo Central. He's got some pretty cool videos on there. One really amazing one on the Expendables, by the way. But this is part 3. Part 1, make sure to check out that, where we talk about Stallone throughout the 80s, part 2 in the 90s, and now part 3, like I mentioned, in the 2000s. So if you like this kind of content, please click that like button to help support the channel. Subscribe if you're not yet subscribed, and let's get to the 2000s.
Since we can kind of generalize the 90s, let's move up to his comeback. Once you have Rocky
Yeah, the
Balboa,
comeback, sure.
Now, interestingly, in Rocky Balboa, they were pressuring him to try to keep it realistic, which again is very, very interesting. He could have easily been at his most aesthetic and his most lean in Rocky Balboa, but the age factor was huge in Rocky Balboa. So for the sake of the story, they actually chose to make it a little bit more realistic. And he looks big, he looks full, but he's not ridiculously lean because, yes, he is brilliant himself, but playing Rocky, who's supposed to be a relatable real life person, it's like, what is the likelihood that at 59 years old, you're still chiseled to the gills? So he had a little bit of a bulkier look, which again, brilliant to even think of.
Yeah, exactly. And also they brought in Antonio Tarver, which had the least impressive physique of all the Rocky villains. So it would be kind of weird if Stallone brought his A game. And you know, you make a good point, because it's not like he couldn't do it. He did it years later in the Expendables, where he looked significantly better than Rocky Balboa, but it wouldn't have made sense if he looked like that in Rocky Balboa. Like, it just wouldn't have.
Yeah, but look how big. And that's actually the biggest you've ever seen Rocky is Rocky at 59.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. He had to be at least 210 in that. I mean, he was thick.
Yeah, so when you get up to the era of Sly movies that I grew up with, starting with Rocky Balboa and Rambo, of course, this follows when he was outed for HGH.
Yeah, then it's not even a question, obviously. It's like, no, it's just a fact, you know, no question.
Right.
Well, you're in Australia, and you got detained because you were in possession of human growth hormones against the law in Australia. You said it's a medical condition.
I want to make this point. The great thing about Sly, and obviously I'm pro cycling, if you want to put it that way. I'm pro juice. I think it's a mistake that our society's turned against it, because a few wrestlers have mixed cycling and juicing with recreational drugs and given themselves heart attacks, and the sports cheating issue becoming a moral issue. So Sylvester Stallone has seen certain things I've done online. He's a little bit more active online these days than you'd think. So if he's to see this by any chance, I'm so pro juice. It's not even funny. And I'm pro Sly and what he does, because it's what he needs to do to perform at his best. I want to make this point, that Sly handled being outed for HGH better than anybody's handled a scandal ever. It was about the most baller way to handle something. They hit him with that very typical Good Morning America. Now, Sly, you were outed for HGH.
The cynics are going to say you had those things because you're off going to shoot Rambo, and you wanted to be pumped for the role.
And instead of him coming out with this, I want to apologize to my family, or lying and saying it wasn't the case, Sly says, yeah, I think a lot of people ought to know about the benefits of testosterone and human growth hormone because of its ability to help you recuperate.
Most importantly about HGH, and I think a lot of people should really be aware of it, is it takes off the wear and tear, especially if you're an athlete, the amount of beating that your body takes.
I'm like, yeah, there you go. And if you notice, he didn't get a lot of flack for that. And then he became the poster boy for the benefits of HGH use as you age.
The power to recuperate is very, very limited. So all it does is expedite.
Because he looked so damn good during the Expendables days, nobody could help but be like, maybe there's something to this. Whereas the baseball players and the basketball players and everybody else that got outed for juice, it was like, wow, it's a shame thing. And you let the kids down. With Sly, if you notice, during the Expendables era, that decade, he was the poster boy for the benefits of taking testosterone and HGH as you age. And he very well changed the attitude surrounding that discussion.
Yeah, he owned up to it. It was a good move, and nobody could really fault him, especially for his age. But you got to love the genius of Stallone flipping the script. It's like, look, instead of vilifying me and making me look bad, I'm going to flip the script and make it like I'm the one doing the right thing and all you guys can benefit. And he does have a point.
So it's really archaic the way people perceive HGH.
That's the whole thing. What was great about the way he handled it is it wasn't just flipping the script, and it wasn't just a tactic to take attention off himself. He was right. And from that point on, you didn't really hear people walking around going, oh, that's Sly. We used to think he was great, but now we know it was just the HGH making him great. No, everybody kind of took notice and was like, there's something to this. This guy's 65 years old, still fighting people and still in fantastic shape.
What is it you said to the kid? It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
So, and then look at Rambo 4. I mean, he doesn't appear shirtless, but he is thick and huge. So again, really the biggest, maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing, but the biggest and fullest you ever saw Rocky and Rambo is Rocky and Rambo in their 60s. I mean, just monstrous in Rambo. And again, you kind of look at the time frame. I remember him saying in interviews, you know, I'm telling my wife that, you know, over the next 6 months, I'm going to turn into a gorilla. You don't turn into a Rambo 4 looking physique in 6 months. I mean, he was enormous. And that's obviously he's using HGH the heaviest. Now, I'd be so interested to know his dosage, his cycle theory, because when he was stopped at the border with HGH, they caught him with a lot of it and he brought it to set. So I don't know. Obviously, I'm not saying he's injecting on set, but I'm saying he was on cycle in the film. He was not on cycle in preparation for the film only. Probably a mixture between, I don't know if it's, I wouldn't assume it's year-round HGH use, but in prep and during the film on cycle.
Yeah, I mean, that's why he was minimum 200 pounds in the fourth Rambo. I think he did put a lot of focus on just kind of like that lumberjack physique. So obviously it wasn't the aesthetics of like, you know, Rambo 2 or Rambo 3, but he just kind of wanted that lumberjack, big, thick forearms, big neck, big traps, you know, just a beast, essentially.
Just a complete beast. And it was so brilliant because like Rambo was always badass, but that's exactly what he was. 1 through 3, he's a badass. He's fucking scary in part 4.
Yeah, no, it's crazy though. Like just comparing Rambo 2 to Rambo 4, you don't even think it's like the same guy. Now, obviously he's a lot older, but I'm just saying the frame, like, and again, it's the decades of GH, I think, that just enlarged everything because it doesn't look like the same guy whatsoever. Like you would never think this dude's skeletal structure from Rambo 2 is the same guy in Rambo 4. Like, and it's not because everything has just gotten bigger.
Yeah, completely. So then I would assume the same sort of scenario for Expendables, just bringing back in the aesthetics.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because he looked a lot better than the Expendables. Those aesthetics definitely came back. Yeah, and that was, when did the first one come out? 2010.
10. Yeah, so Expendables is 2010, and I would assume, for lack of a more polite way of putting it, the same sort of HGH regimen, and back to being insanely, or probably the most vascular you really seen him on film. I mean, that was the first thing that impressed me about his Expendables physique. I was just like, what? Just insanely shredded.
Yeah, so this is a 60-plus-year-old man. You know, here's the thing with the vascularity, though. Now, obviously, he's been on stuff for a while at this point, but just getting older, he's going to get more vascular. Like I've noticed now, I'm more vascular than I was like when I was 30. It's not necessarily like I'm leaner now. I think just over time, just the more work you've done and the more blood you've had flowing through your muscles, the veins just over time get bigger and you just look like older dudes just look more vascular, man. It's that muscle maturity.
It's muscle maturity, but I also think it's the skin thinning or the skin
becoming. It could be the
more
skin
clear.
Thinning too. I mean, that does happen when you get older,
so to speak. But my assessment from this comes from the fact that Sly is no longer vascular. He really is no longer vascular. He no longer has a vascular appearance. His biceps are no longer vascular. So
you mean like right now, 2021?
Right now, and he's only gotten older. Now I don't know if you want to attribute that to lack of the muscle working. I know he doesn't train as hard as he used to, but in the Expendables, I attribute that to excess blood flow from whatever cycle he's on. I don't know if it was just HGH, but certainly HGH was at play. This is when he was really known for being the poster boy of HGH use, because he's got the #1 movie 4 weeks in a row, in incredible shape at 62 years old, filming at 63 when it releases, I believe. And I mean, not only are his veins on the surface, but they're big. They're
Yeah, it
excess
was
blood
by
flow. I mean,
far the
he's
most impressive.
pumped the whole film.
Wouldn't you love to look like that in your 60s?
I'm going to, because I'm
Or
going
at
to
any
take
age.
HGH.
At any age. Screw the 60s at any age, man.
Yeah, I'm going to, because I'm going to take HGH.
So he's like, I mean, he's spoken highly of TRT too. So he's obviously minimum on HGH and TRT, minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he has to. That's the thing. I mean, maybe you could be critical of Sly during his prime if you want to assume he was on a cycle during his prime. But at the age that he is now, you need to be on something to do what he's doing. There, you just don't do it with the natural amount of testosterone that's in your body.
Yeah, I mean, not at
decreasing.
that age, man. I'm glad he's using that stuff, because he wouldn't be making these movies otherwise. So I'm like, yeah, do it, Sly. You know, at that point. But,
Yeah, I do think my opinion of modern Sly is I do think he's on TRT, obviously, consistently. I do think he dialed back on the HGH, and I think he's smart enough to do it for health reasons, because HGH in your 70s, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but I'm sure just based on common sense, it's not a great idea. When you enlarge the organs, you enlarge the heart. Actually, more recently, you can see Sly where it looks like he has a bit of a gut, and the tabloids were poking fun at him. Oh, Sly hasn't been
I
making
see.
movies.
Yeah, I seen that picture.
Sly hasn't
Yeah,
been
it's
making
not
movies,
bad.
and the tabloids joking at him, saying that he might have put on a bit of weight. I don't know if he put on weight or if that's an HGH gut that he's developed.
No, it's
Because
not a fat gut. There's no way, because the tabloids, like literally a week before that or 2 weeks before that, when he had his shirt off, they were saying, "Oh, he's in such great shape at this age." There's no way he all of a sudden put like 20 pounds of fat in his gut 2 weeks later. So
right, so HGH as you get older, not a great idea to be, and literally enlarging your heart. Your heart only has so much room to pump, so you would just think based on common sense. Even though I'm not a doctor, I think he's smart
doesn't
enough to know.
steroids enlarge your heart too, though?
It thickens your heart, and training in general, even natural, thickens your heart over the time, and you develop what's called an athlete's heart.
Interesting.
So, which is probably what we're doing to ourselves right now, but beats the hell out of not exercising and not taking care of your body in that respect. But I do think that he obviously, based on his appearance, based on his age, based on his intelligence, dialed back on the HGH use. I want to say around maybe his late 60s, maybe Expendables 3, probably the last time you've seen him actively using HGH. Based on his appearance, he has no veins in his biceps anymore. Vascularity is still there a little bit in his forearms, but you saw active blood flow, I think, in the Expendables movies, all 3 Expendables movies, just an excess blood flow constantly being pumped to those most muscles to the extent that even when he's relaxed, he's not gripping anything, he's not flexing, the veins are just on the surface in the most aesthetic way. I mean, the craziest, most impressive looking veins, just crazy.
Yeah, that's the discussion I always have. So my brother's a lifetime natty. We got another good friend who's like a lifetime natty, all about 40. And we always talk about the dream is, wouldn't it be great if you look like you just worked out like all the time, just walking around? Like that's the appeal to me of like, for somebody using it's just like, dude, I feel like Superman. You got I mean, you just look so much bigger and fuller and the veins popping. It's like, okay, I just got done like, doing these sets working out. If I could look like this all the time, that'd be insane,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the appearance that a cycle gives you, because the blood flow is constant. And that's the biggest thing I miss when I'm off a cycle, is not having that consistent blood flow, because basically a pump is like an erection in your arms. I mean, that's really all it is. It's you're stuffing blood into that muscle. I mean, you're feeding it nutrients, you're feeding it blood when you get yourself a good pump. So to have that consistently, because the blood flow, I mean, it's flowing at a rate that it wouldn't be if you weren't on a cycle, kind of provides that look 24/7. Now, I'm only on my 4th week. I don't exactly have it yet, but it's the #1 thing that I miss when I'm off a cycle. That's what I attribute to Sly's look in the Expendables and in Bullet to the Head. I don't know what it is about Bullet to the Head different from the Expendables. There wasn't much of a time difference. I mean, it was around the same time that he's doing these films, but incredibly aesthetic in Bullet to the Head in a way that's it seemed like in Bullet to the Head, he aimed for I just want to be cut. I want to look like a regular cat that's cut. He didn't look too hardened. He didn't look overly muscular. but the cut in that film that he did, actually dropping weight from Expendables, I think it appears to be, again, another really aesthetic and impressive look. For a guy like Sly, he needs it for the kind of films that he's doing.
Yeah, sure, sure.
If
I
at
wouldn't
any
fault him
point,
for that.
right, if at any point I sounded like the tabloids in my assessments, I'm pro steroid. On top of the fact that I just understand. I mean, you try one day on set of the Expendables. At your age, at
He
my
broke his
age,
neck on that
yeah,
when the wrestler dude threw him through the wall,
right. So Sly's always done what he needs to do to be a cinematic athlete. But something that's interesting to think about in wrapping this up is the bottom line is you cannot take a 4-compound cycle and look like Sylvester Stallone.
You cannot, and I only wish it was true. You could just take something like that and you're in shape. You have to put in years and years and years of hard labor to stay in shape.
It just doesn't happen. I mean, it's the hard work, it's the training philosophy, it's the diet philosophy, and then maybe the cycle theory last. But a huge misconception about steroid use is a lot of people think that if you're on it, you look like Sylvester Stallone or you look like Van Damme. It's not the case. There are plenty of people walking around day in and day out that look like shit. You would never think they're on a cycle, and they're on a cycle. Not only do they not understand cycle theory, how to use it properly, but they have no philosophy in terms of training, in terms of diet, and you don't just take something and look like Sylvester Stallone. So nothing of what I said is to discount the man's efforts and doing what he needed to do to perform at his best. He definitely had one hell of a theory, great support behind him, fantastic trainers, and a component that everybody can't have, which is the mind connection with your muscles and the mind to know exactly how to get the physique that you want based on not only cycle theory, but everything else that comes with it. You don't just take something and become best at what you do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because these are comments I always run into my videos. I actually ran into one yesterday that I responded to because he's like, oh, it's just the steroids. The diet doesn't mean anything. I'm like, dude, do you know how many people I see in the gym who I know are on stuff and they have absolutely no definition and they kind of look like shit in my opinion. But it's like, trust me, they wish they could just take something and be as ripped as Stallone and Rocky IV. So yeah, diet's pretty damn important. But those comments that come through always kind of piss me off because I like how you said you can't discount everything this man does. Okay, so he's getting some assistance on top of that. At least he started to at a certain point, which I'm saying Rambo 3, other people are saying before that. But regardless, at some point, he's getting the extra, but he's still doing everything else that most people aren't willing to do.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. And he is a master at crafting his physique. A master. There's a mentality and a training theory as well as a cycle theory. Cycle theory probably being last. That is what built his physique, as well as advice that came from outside sources. I'm sure, like Gunnar Peterson, that's his name, Gunnar Peterson, and everybody else that was involved in helping him craft his physique the way he did. But he almost has the mentality of a bodybuilder without the moronic side of it, which is bigger is better, better is always more is always better. You take it to the extreme and forget the effects it's going to have on
See,
your
here's the
body.
thing. One reason why I think he did that is because he knew just from a genetic standpoint that he's not going to be able to compete with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he can't win that size game. But what can he do? He could win the aesthetics game. He could win the hardness and the leanness game. So he could beat Arnold in fitness, but not like in the mass, department.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. And nobody did it better than he did, I'd say, to this day.
Yeah, no, definitely. So real quick, like the last thing, what do you think the best Stallone physique is ever?
Well, I grew up on Expendables, Bullet to the Head. That was my teenage years. So I want to say older Stallone, Bullet to the Head, just because it was out of this world. I mean, how ripped he was able to get at that age and the appearance he had. He also looks like he's like 40 in that film. And
Yeah, no, it's
65.
ridiculous, man.
So there's that. I'd say the second half of his career. The first half of his career, yeah, I suppose you know what? I'm gonna say the first half of his career or his younger days, Lock Up. Later on,
Lockup, okay.
Lock Up. I'm gonna say initially, but in the Stallone films I grew up with, Bullet to the Head.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go with and this was, like the same time because they came out the same year, like Rambo First Blood Part 2, Rocky 4. Like that to me is like just a beautiful physique. Like if you've seen somebody like that walking on the beach, that's going to be more impressive than some dude with a lot of mass, even if they're pretty lean. Like that is just a really beautiful, aesthetic, pleasing to the eye physique. Now, Rambo 3 was more impressive, but again, it kind of had an unnatural appearance, which I used to be more into, but now I kind of like more of a healthier, natural physique. But again, still kind of with that look everybody chases that most people obviously get when they have assistance, you know, like the rounder shoulders and just the fuller muscles, you know. But I don't know. There's some about Rambo 2 and Rocky 4 that's like, this is just very pleasing. It's not the biggest physique. It's like 170 at 5'10", but this is just a really good looking physique. I think most guys would just absolutely love to look like. All right, that's going to wrap up this video, guys. Let me know in the comments below, by the way, what your favorite Sylvester Stallone physique was, like from which movie.